Welcome to another in the series of demonstrations designed to get you quickly up to speed with what's new in NX-CAM. This video will demonstrate how toolpath generation can now be excluded for operations that are up to date, resulting in a significant savings in processing time. We'll begin by looking at the new manufacturing preference that determines whether or not toolpaths for all selected operations are generated. Select File, Preferences, Manufacturing. Select the Operation tab. Force Regenerate is a new option and is off by default. When turned on, toolpaths for all selected operations are generated as in previous versions of NX regardless of the operation status or software version. When turned off, toolpath generation is excluded for operations that are up to date. Excluding toolpath generation for operations that are up to date only applies when multiple operations are selected either specifically or as a group. Click Cancel in the Manufacturing Preferences dialog box. Operations displaying a regenerate status or containing toolpaths that were last generated in a previous version of NX are not up to date and will be regenerated. You cannot determine by simply looking at the program view which other operations, if any, are out of date due to being generated in a previous version of NX. You can determine which version of NX was last used to generate the operation by selecting the operation and clicking MB3 Information. Select Z-Level Process in the program view and select Generate Toolpath in the ribbon bar. If the pause after each path checkbox is left on, the name of the operation that is currently being looked at is displayed at the bottom of the window as you click OK for each operation. Notice the alert that indicates the toolpath for the first operation was not generated because it is already up to date. In the Path Generation dialog box, click the Pause after each path checkbox. Click OK. A window displays indicating that toolpaths for the 5 out-of-date operations were generated and the toolpaths for the 7 up-to-date operations were not generated. Toolpaths for these 2 operations were generated because they displayed a regenerate status. Toolpaths for these 3 operations were generated because they were last generated in a previous version of NX. All of the operations in the program are now up to date. Click Accept Paths. As stated earlier, excluding toolpath generation for operations that are up to date applies only when multiple operations are selected. To illustrate this, we'll select a single up-to-date operation and notice that the toolpath generates. Select the ZL Preruf ZL operation and click Generate Toolpath. Notice that the toolpath generates even though the operation is up to date. Now we'll select more than one up-to-date operation and notice that the toolpaths do not generate. Select 2 up-to-date operations and click Generate Toolpath. Clear the Pause after each path checkbox. Click OK. A window displays indicating that the toolpaths for the up-to-date operations were not generated because they are already up to date. Click Accept Paths. The off default of Forced Regenerate is determined by customer defaults. Select File, Utilities, Customer Defaults. Select Operation under Manufacturing and select the Toolpath tab. Force Regenerate is off by default. Click Cancel in the Customer Defaults dialog box. This concludes the demonstration of how toolpath generation can now be excluded for operations that are up to date. Thank you.